is bad though. Maybe I shouldn't give this example because this is kind of bad. But this is a get to know you episode.
Okay.
And so I will say this. There was one time when I was in Milwaukee and I was super mad, right? And I was looking for drama to pop off because I wanted to participate in that drama. And so I did go to a park in the hood so I could participate in any drama that may pop off. And my mother called me and she was like, "Where you at?" And I told her where I was at. She's like, "Why are you there?" And she's like, "They started shooting." And I was like, "Oh, I'm good." And so with that being said, I went with the intention, this when I was younger as well. I went with the intentions thinking that this was a bad area and I want to fight. Let's fight. And so I know you wouldn't think that about me,
So you're a new. So you're a new from
Yes,
ATL. That was you went to
And
East London.
And
You
so
went to
I
go for a little bit
literally
of
was looking
danger.
for a fight, you know what I'm saying? And so I will acknowledge that at that point, I felt that could have been me being classist. Like I had to go into the hood to find drama so I can get into this fight. And because where I was, there was no fighting, supposedly. Like so I would say that my mindset at that time frame was like, oh, but then later on, everybody was cool and copacetic. I got invited to a picnic. I'm a fucking stranger. They're like, "Hey, you want to come get some barbecue?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." And so, and that was fun.
That wasn't my
anyways.
question though, right? Because I think you took it somewhere else. I thought I asked you something else, right?
You did. You asked me, have I ever locked my doors? My doors stay locked all the time. I'm saying in regards to the one
That was
time.
cap, S&M.
What? My
That's
doors
cap.
stay locked all the time.
Okay, so yes, off of GP, I get that your doors stay. Jay, you know what I'm saying, right? Can we act like there aren't Black people who go into impoverished hood neighborhoods and fear for their well-being and will lock the door or take extra measures that they wouldn't do in their suburban neighborhoods? Come on, man. Like, can we have a real conversation at all?
I would say extra measure in the sense that I'm hyper aware. I will acknowledge I am hyper aware when I go into impoverished neighborhoods.
Yes.
My head stays on the swivel.
Thank goodness we're not talking about accountability this episode, right? So my question
The shade. I answered the question. You just not liking the way I answered.
Okay,
Go ahead, Jay. It was to you anyways.
Because the reason why I'm asking this, right? So imagine like you're in a well-established office building, right? And you and a white woman get on the elevator, and that white woman clutches her purse. I think most of us would assume that's racist. Yes or no? Am I off on that or no?
No, right? You're right. Yeah.
Now, if a Black woman did that, and because the person was dressed, because we're trying to talk about classism, and what I'm saying is, I don't think most people are sophisticated enough to really just determine whether or not the behavior that they're getting from the other person is classism versus racism, right? Because I do think there is an element that is race-based. It may not be racism because maybe some people don't believe that Black people can technically be racist against other Black people. I don't know. But talking about prejudice, prejudging someone off of stereotypes that we as Black people may have about us, some of us deploy those same stereotypes against each other, right? And I don't know that it's strictly just based off of class. I feel like it's cool to say that because, yes, class is a part of it. But there's like a danger element that we might, if two people, one white, one Black, were dressed the same from a socioeconomic standpoint, I sincerely believe there's a lot of us that will have more fear in our hearts for the Black person than we would for the white person. Y'all disagree with that?
I do not disagree, but I think there's like something in the culture. Never mind. I'm not gonna say
I'm just gonna say, look, you're not gonna answer like my answer because I think it's psychological programming that has been put on us to make it seem like Black people are automatically dangerous, and that's because we're constantly bombarded with these issues of Black people being dangerous in the media. You would think nobody committed crime other than Black people. So I actually make a conscious effort not to be like that, But that's only because I recognize that psychological programming. So.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so that's why, like, I think even though Lil Duval's comment may not have been perfect, because a lot of times I hate, like, when I hear the conversation in the public space, we focus on like the minutia of it. Oh, you didn't say the right thing, as opposed to the intent behind what he was saying, right? I think there's a lot of ways that I agree with him because how we act towards each other can come across as racist. It can come across as classist. It can come across a certain type of way because the behavior itself looks the same. And then the deep-seated rooted, like, for example, when we see a black guy who, hates on black women and, holds up white women, we say, oh, you hate yourself. There's self-hatred there, right? To a certain extent. We understand how that person can internalize white supremacy and, in a way, racism against themselves, if you will, right? In terms of hating someone or believing them to be inferior because of a thing, right? So if a person can internalize that in their dating choices, then how can they not then externalize that in how they treat other black people? The guy that we talked about a couple of stories ago, right, who was talking about, oh, black women should be this, that, and the third, his language was pretty racist. It had nothing to do necessarily about class. And I think most of us, if we believed that he was telling the truth in regards, that's how he really felt, would probably lean to say, nah, that was racist versus classist, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, do you guys disagree that there's probably more truth to the racist part of Little Duval's assertion than just classist, is what I'm asking y'all.
Oh, is it more racist than classist?
I'm not saying it's more than that. I'm saying, is it more than y'all are letting on? Because I feel like in the first part, we were really trying to painstakingly paint it out to be, okay, yes, class, class, class. And I agree with that. I'm saying, though, that when we delve a little bit deeper to some of the programming, to some of the white supremacy, to some of the things that we can point to when we see it in other stories to say, nah, that's self-hatred, that's internalized racism, right? Then what I'm saying is then that if there is instances of that in other instances, then why wouldn't it be, it's not far-fetched for it to be in the way that Little Duval stated it in his original post.
Oh no, I see. I think in that light, I would probably agree with you in the sense that I think there's some conflation that happens between like the poverty and crime, right? Or between racism and classism. So where if we begin to see a certain group of people as being more associated with poverty, we will then see them as being more likely to commit crime because they are, you know what I'm saying, at a more destitute or desperate place, right? If we see a group of people who are more associated with affluence, we think they are less likely to commit crime unless we've ascribed to them some sort of cultural sense of evil, right? Purpose. So, in that sense, I think that I don't know. You can separate the two. So, let's take Lil Duval's thing, right? I think he loves. I think most black people, I think, right, who are especially who are raised around any black people, are genuinely more comfortable with black people generally if they're raised. I mean, I guess maybe it's just conditioning. I mean, not to say they can't be comfortable with everybody, but they tend to be like, oh, black people, like, you know. uh, In other words, I've been out of town and I've had a random conversation with a random black person and we was on the same page. And I'd be like, man, I love black people because we be coming from the same place. I think Tupac said that one time. Anyway, but I agree, right? There's a certain level of black experience that is common no matter where you go, it seems. Okay. So now that doesn't mean though that because I feel this universal blackness that I can't be in a certain area where I feel like if I'm shining too much, flossing too much, doing too much, the rest of the people who are also in my group of universal blackness are going to paint me as them and not us. And I think that's that distinction. Now, I don't know that it's racist as much as it feels more classist. It feels more like these people are going. Somebody's going to look at me, regardless of my color being the same, and say, "Dude, you're not like us anymore. You crossed over." I remember, and I'm gonna say this now, land, and it to me, it's a small point, but it kind of points to the point I'm making. When I was in elementary, we got kicked out of the house we were living in, right? We was living in sub two, like not a great neighborhood in Jackson, a little rough on the west side, but it's all good though, right? We got put out. We was renting. The lady wanted her mama to live there. Long story short, though, I get put out around the same time I get in the gifted program. So I'm talking to one of the girls from my neighborhood at the school, used to live on my street, and she's like, "Man, you changed. You know what I mean? You moved out the hood. Now you all up here in the little gifted class. Like you like white now. Like you brand new." And I hadn't really changed. My perspective hasn't changed. But in that sense, there was definitely a distinction that was made, and that distinction was classist, even though it wasn't racist. Right? So that's my roundabout. Did I do it right?
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
I'm gonna answer directly in this case. I agree, that it is I just realized as you were talking, Nick, earlier about this and rephrasing it, that actually it is racism because I wrote an entire book about us internalizing stereotypes and harmful narratives against each other, Black men and Black women, because it was based on race. It was based on us internalizing the stereotypes that they put on us, which technically is racism. And so now I will say, yes, I can see this statement being racist as well as classism. But I also agree with Jay that they are hand in hand in some cases. But the root of it is the fact that we internalize stereotypes to our detriment.
Mm.